Hello, and welcome to another episode of Superpowers, the show where you get to experience the extraordinary. And today I'm very excited. I have medium Deborah Diamond with us today, and I'm very excited just because I'm kind of right now on this path of NDEs and mediumship, and Deborah's a great one, so I'm looking forward to chatting with her and giving you a chance to hear her story. Real quick, before we jump in with Deborah, though, I would like to just tell you a little bit about something that we've got coming up on Streaming for the Soul, and it is going to be coming up on June 6th, and it is a Q&A with Lee Carroll and Cryon. And if you live in Southern California, if you live in Arizona, Las Vegas area, you should really come because Lee is awesome in person, and it's just so much fun to listen to him. He's a great speaker. He is so affable, and it's a Q&A. So people are sending in their questions, and a lot of it is really going to be talking about just what is happening right now on planet Earth. And it's just the changes that we're all going through, why we're experiencing some of the things we're experiencing. So definitely worth checking it out. Again, that is June 6th. If you would like tickets, you can find them on streamingforthesoul.com. And it'd be right there. There's a pop-up right on the home page, and you can just click on that, and you can get tickets. And again, you can attend live if you're in the area, and you can also live stream it, or you can just rent the VOD. So there are a lot of ways to participate in it, and it's really a fun one. So, and now, really, without any sort of further ado, I would like to just jump in and say good morning to our guest, Deborah Diamond. So good morning, Deborah. How are you?
Oh, great. How are you? Happy Memorial Day.
Well, thank you. It's off to a good start. Got an interview going with you, so pretty happy about that. So now tell me, Deborah, I just want to kind of jump right in and hear a little bit about your gift as a medium, and I noticed that this was something that, unlike a lot of people, you were just naturally born with this, rather than it being, brought on by, a traumatic, either physical or emotional event. So, just like to talk a little bit about that, and maybe what that was like for you growing up and having a superpower.
Okay, thank you. Well, I am a psychic and a medium. All mediums are psychics. Not all psychics are mediums. You have to go higher in terms of your vibration to pick up the information that's available for mediums. Mediums are people who can connect with people who've passed over. So I was as a child, I had some abilities, but I didn't really know that that's what they were. Back then people didn't talk about being psychic or mediumship. It just wasn't part of the discussion. So I really didn't know that that's what it was. It wasn't really until I was a professional in the investment business. I was a money manager and a commentator on CNBC. That I realized that there was maybe something more going on. And the way it kind of surfaced was, as a money manager, I would have to evaluate public companies to see if they were good investments or not. And in the investment business, there's always a lot of reading to do. So I would have a big stack of mail delivered to me 3 times a day, a big stack like this, full of annual reports and prospectuses. And I didn't even really have to read them. I would know without reading them about these companies. I would know about the managements. I would know about the industries, the products. I would know if they would be good investments. And I didn't really understand how I knew this. It wasn't something that I could talk about with other people in the investment business. I mean, it's a dollars and cents business, and people certainly don't talk about being psychic. But I usually knew about 85% of the answer before I would even go out and meet with the managements of these companies. What happened was, because I was getting information from somewhere else, my investment record also reflected that, and my investment record was, 2 or 3x other people that I worked
Yeah.
with. So It was, it was unusual. I didn't know though that I was psychic. I really it didn't enter my mind. I didn't know what it was.
Right.
I had a boss who used to say to me, Deborah, you have very good instincts. And I
Yeah.
talked to that, I figured, okay, that's the answer. Good instincts.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't until 2008 that when I attended an intuition development class in New York, I thought it would be fun to go to this class. I thought I have good intuition. It'd be fun to take a little class to tune it up. It wasn't until I went to that class and had an unusual experience there that my powers came on full blown.
Huh.
And what happened in that class, I mean,
Right.
if you're interested, I could tell you.
Yeah, no, actually, I'd really love to hear about that and know what that experience was for you. So, yes, please tell us.
Okay. There were, the class was in New York. It was for the weekend. There were about 25 people in the class. I didn't know any of them. And we started off Saturday morning by doing some basic exercises. And I was getting lots of information in these exercises. I didn't know how that was possible, but I didn't think too much about it because it was pretty low key. And then, we took a break. And when we came back, the teacher said, now we're going to do a seance. And I really did not want to participate in a seance. That's not what I came for. I was afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And, I finally decided, well, it's Saturday morning. This class goes through Sunday afternoon. I'll do the seance and then we'll go on to the next exercise. Nothing's going to happen anyway.
Right.
And so, the teacher put us in a meditative state. And she said, when we're done, I'll take you out of the meditation. And if you see anything, you let me know and I'll tell you what to do.
Huh. Okay.
So I meditated, and when we were done, I came out of the meditative state, and the teacher said, does anyone see anything? And I looked around the room, and everyone was looking at each other, and I raised my hand, and the teacher said, yes, Deborah, what do you see? And I said, well, I see about 50 people, and the people that I saw were people that had passed over.
Uh-huh.
So some of them went with people in the room. I didn't know that yet. Some of them were relatives of mine, and some of them were just random people kind of walking through. I was able to see all of this. And,
Right.
People have asked me, did I actually see these? And I did. I saw them, just like I see you. So
yeah.
Teachers said, well, if you see someone in the corner of the room, they probably go with someone sitting in that corner. And I said, well, I do see someone in the corner, and I described him. And the woman sitting in that corner began to sob and said she could identify that person, that was her fiance who had died 2 years ago. And so she asked me if, during the break, if she showed me some pictures on her cell phone, if I would be able to identify him from these pictures. Mm-hmm. And I said yes. So during the break, she flipped through the pictures on her cell phone, and I said, there, that's him. And she said, yes, that's my fiance. He died 2 years ago. Now, she had wanted to hear from him, and she had not. And so she was very grateful to me for making that connection.
Yeah.
And she hugged me, and she thanked me. And, it wasn't lost on me that I had done something meaningful for someone. Now, remember, I come from the world of Wall Street.
Right.
There's no hugs on Wall Street, and no thank yous either. So, it wasn't, it was not lost on me that here was a new experience and something that was, perhaps more meaningful.
Right.
So the rest of the weekend, we continued in that class. I had more experiences like that. I was pretty shook up. Mm-hmm. I had no context for any of this. Right. The teacher didn't give any other explanation. People were coming up to me in the class and saying, oh, you must have been doing this for a long time. And I said, actually, I've never done this before.
Which, of course, is not what they wanted to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I was in the same boat they were. So I drove home to Maryland Sunday night. I live in Maryland. And on my way home, I called one of my sons, who always scores very high in logic tests. So he's very left brain. And I called him and I told him what happened. And he didn't say a word, but when I was all done, he said, well, that makes sense. We're just energy, and the energy has to go somewhere.
Right.
And when he said that, I had a context for, putting this event in, understanding it. It
Yeah.
wasn't something that was, we weren't talking about ghosts. We weren't talking about paranormal. Nobody was saying I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
There was an explanation. It was kind of a pseudoscientific explanation.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I felt a little better about it. I
Mm-hmm.
still don't tell anybody what happened because it's not the kind of thing you talk about.
Yeah.
And and I went for several months without trying to figure it out, but keeping it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, that summer, I decided to go to Taos, New Mexico for a couple months to paint. I'm also an artist.
Mm-hmm.
You might see in the background, I have a lot of art in my house.
Yes.
Some of it's mine. So anyway, I decided to go to Taos for 2 months to paint. And really, that was all I was planning on doing, just to go to paint. I rented a place for 2 months. And at the end of 2 months, I decided I wasn't coming back. And that's a very common situation in Taos. There are lots of people, artists, writers, musicians, spiritualists, psychics,
Right.
uh, creatives who come to Taos and are just attracted by the energy and they don't leave.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk to the locals and you say, "How long have you been here?" you get stories like, "Well, I came for a weekend 20 years ago." So it's kind of a thing that happens.
Right.
So I decided to stay, and while I was in Taos, this is where I unpacked this energy and this gift that was given to me, and I relaxed about it. I
Uh-huh.
didn't think about it really at all because it was so normal out there.
Right.
In Taos, when somebody asks you, "What do you do?" and you say, "I'm a psychic," they say, "Oh yeah, me too." So it's just not, it's not a big deal. And I just didn't really think twice about it.
Yeah.
So this is where I began to do the work and eventually do readings and teach some classes and go a little deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I came back east. And when I came back east, I thought, well, that's the end of that because, the East Coast is not like Taos at all. And I figured I won't be doing this work anymore. But that's not what happened. I was approached by a woman who'd had an NDE. She was in her 30s and had a cardiac arrest,
Mm.
taken to a Hopkins hospital. She's in the literature, and she died, but she came back,
Mm-hmm.
and she asked me to do a reading for her. And then she asked me if I would do a reading for her friend, and the friend wanted me to do a reading for her mother, and then they wanted me to do a workshop, and one thing led to another, and before you knew it, I was, practicing here on the East Coast.
Right.
Now, shortly after that, I was asked to do a reading for a famous NDE or near-death experiencer who had um, been struck by lightning and came back with very special gifts.
Mm-hmm.
When I read for this person, I was seeing some very unusual symbols in the reading.
Uh-huh.
And when I came home that evening, I started thinking about, what happened to him? Why does he have these special gifts?
Mm-hmm.
And what's he supposed to do with them? And
Right.
what about other NDEers? What do they get, if
Yeah.
anything? So,
Right.
and why are they getting it? So I looked up near death experience after effects and I found out that there hadn't been any research done. This was in 2013. There
Mm.
had been very little research done. So I said, well, I guess I'll have to do the research. Now, it's not that unusual for me to make that conclusion because remember, I used to be in the investment business. The
Uh-huh.
first 10 years, I was a healthcare research analyst.
Oh.
So my job was to go out and research companies in
Right.
healthcare
Yeah.
that had, and they were usually smaller companies where very little research had been done. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like the person laying down the tracks. So I had this sort of background, and so I decided I would do the research, but I was interested only in after effects that were either physiologic or cognitive
Mm-hmm.
because up until then, the research on NDE after effects had focused on just a couple things: electrical sensitivity,
Uh-huh.
social issues like 65 to 75% of people get divorced,
Ah,
uh,
right.
or they come back more spiritual, or they come back as psychics or mediums.
Right.
That was,
Uh-huh.
and there was really no way for me to measure. If somebody said to me, "I'm more spiritual now," there was no way for me to measure that.
True.
If somebody said, I'm more psychic," or "I'm a psychic now," no way for me to measure that.
Yeah.
But somebody comes back with a shift in their IQ, or a shift in their eyesight,
Mm-hmm.
or a change in their hearing, or now they are a musician and they had no musical ability before that.
Right.
That's something that's irrefutable and in some cases can be measured. So that was what interested me.
Uh-huh.
That was the work that I did. And, now um, near death experience after effects are increasingly becoming part of the conversation, although they're still not well understood. I mean, it's a little disturbing to me because I see online people saying, "This happened to me. Is that an after effect?" And then somebody else says yes or no. So
Yeah, it is.
it's danger of being online, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah.
but and a lot of the after effects are still, people are still clustering themselves along the lines of the mediumship and the electrical sensitivity. But there are many other after effects that are far-reaching
Mm-hmm.
and super interesting,
Right.
and really go far along the lines of mission, I
Uh-huh.
think, addressing the issue of mission,
Right.
because these people come back with skills and abilities and gifts that they can then distribute to others.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
a very complex issue. I do think that near-death experiences, this is just my opinion and others may not agree, but I think there's a lot more to them than the light and the tunnel and the
Mm-hmm.
life view. I mean, people love the stories and I can understand that, but
Yeah.
there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
There's the issue of why is this happening?
Mm-hmm.
What does the universe have in mind that this is happening to increasing numbers of people?
Right.
What is it that they intend?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of questions, that
Yeah.
go on just the visual. I mean, you're in the business, right? So television and movies have promulgated this spectacle
Mm-hmm.
of brilliant white light and heavenly landscapes and this sort of thing. And it makes sense, if you're in a
Yeah.
visual media,
Right.
it makes
Yeah.
sense that something like that would be very compelling. But there's more behind the curtain,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what interests me.
Yeah.
Um,
Question for you, just real quick. In your research, um, I, because you mentioned that it seems to be that near-death experiences are happening more frequently and seem to be more common. Do you think the incidence of it is that they're happening more frequently, or do you think people are maybe starting to be more comfortable talking about it and telling people that they had a near-death experience?
Yeah, that's a good question, Carl. I think actually the answer is probably both, although we don't know because we don't have the information is not available from 20 years ago to know how many people were having these experiences and not talking about them. It's
Right.
just not available.
Yeah.
But several things have happened in the last 5 years. Eben Alexander wrote his book,
Yeah.
and after he wrote his book, I think people said, "Well, wait a second. If this guy can talk about his experience, I'm going to talk about mine."
Right.
So the market's just been flooded with all these self-published books about individuals' near-death experiences. So,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of people feel comfortable talking about that now.
Right.
But at the same time, I can tell you, as a psychic and a medium, I have people who come to me all the time who are having spiritually transformative experiences. Only they don't know that that's what they are.
Right.
They come and they say something happened to me. I'm not sure what it is, and then they describe it, and we get into a reading, and we find that there's been some sort of shift has taken place.
Mm-hmm.
So. Um, it seems to be affecting more and more people, and it seems to be affecting more people who normally would not fall into that bucket.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, people who are, solid citizens, who,
Yeah. Exactly.
who are in very left brain kind of professions,
Uh-huh.
and, not just, people who are on the fringe.
Right.
So, it just seems to be affecting more and more people. There seems to be a shift going on, and I don't know the answer to why that is, but I do think that there's more and more interest in this.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems to be. Another thing that I just was curious about as you were talking about your research. I'm familiar with pretty much the things that you mentioned that most people are familiar with. The increased sort of spiritual awareness, totally different understanding and perspective on death. Maybe having had an encounter with God, or that something that just felt like that to them. But I'm fascinated by. I actually had never given any thought about physical transformations or physiology that may have changed as a result of a near-death experience. What are some of the things that you noted? You mentioned the musician or becoming a musician. What just are some other things that maybe you've run across that where people's physiology is different, or it's a cognitive change in them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's a number of after effects that they can come back with. Not now, I have to say, not everybody comes back with these, because
Right.
people say to me, "Well, I didn't come back as a musician.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me?" So not
Disclaimer
everybody
time.
comes back, but they do come back with altered energy. Everybody comes back with altered energy, and that energy, that alteration, can manifest in a number of ways.
Hmm.
So. Some people come back with musical ability that they didn't have prior to the experience. Some people come back with artistic ability that they didn't have before their NDEs. There's a
Right.
fellow in my book. My book, by the way, is Life After Near Death. And there's a fellow in Life After Near Death, a case of a man who was a scientist who came back as an artist. And he said to me, because I met him, he lives in Louisville, and
Hmm.
when I met him, he said, "This is not me. I'm a scientist. I am not an artist." But he's an artist now, and
Yeah.
he has this compulsion to make art. This energy is expressed as a compulsion. So all of these people, whether they're artists, they're writers, they're musicians, they have this compulsion
Right.
to do this work, and it's this energy, this excess of energy that they have, this overload of energy, and it expresses itself by this compulsive activity,
Hmm.
and that lasts until they kind of burn off that energy, and then it builds up again, and the cycle starts all over again.
Right.
So it could be music, it could be art, it could be uh, for some people, they come back with physiologic shifts. So there are many cases of people with enhanced vision. There's
Hmm.
a man in Life After Near Death who came back with better than perfect eyesight. His eyesight was 20/90 before his NDE, and following his NDE was 20/10, and it was measured. He had
Hmm.
his physical and his vision checked before his NDE. It just happened that he had it checked, and then he had it checked afterwards because he was actually on the Discovery Channel about his near-death experience. And from being in TV, they said, we're checking all this. You're not just going on the air and saying, this happened
Right.
to you, to
Yeah.
check it. So he had his vision checked, and it turned out now it's 20/10. It used to be 20/90, and so in his case, that alteration in energy, improved his vision. There are
Hmm.
people whose hearing becomes very acute, so their hearing improves. And I'm not talking about, by the way, you can just hear, across the room a little bit or a little better, you could hear down the street.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And
you come back with these, some of these people come back with these very unnatural enhanced abilities.
hmm.
There are people who've come back with enhanced IQ. There's a
Right.
woman in the book who lives in California who had her IQ tested before her NDE, and then it was tested again after her NDE, and her IQ went up about 20 points. She's in the Mensa category now. Um, so these kinds of things do happen, and they're documented,
Hmm.
and I believe that they're an expression of this enhanced energy, because people come back, as I said, with their energy altered, with their consciousness altered.
Right.
The mix of their physical body to their consciousness seems to have shifted. They have
Hmm.
more up there now, more consciousness,
Right.
and what do they do with it? Some people don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Some people are lucky and, are led into something or have a specific gift. So there's no one size fits all. There's no, I can't tell you that everyone is going to follow this one pattern, because they don't.
Right. Right. Darn, because I was going to ask you if you had perhaps noticed a pattern. The example that you gave was somebody who was very left brain, moving into something that was significantly right brain, the scientist to artist. So my question was, do you notice a pattern in shift and going from more of a sort of logical brain into a more creative brain? Is there anything like that? Left brain to right brain, or it can really be anything. I mean, did you ever know an artist that suddenly became Einstein?
Suddenly became what?
Einstein.
Oh, Einstein.
Well, scientist. I just was looking for a different word.
There's probably not enough data available to answer that question. You'd probably have to do such a large scale study to get something definitive. I mean, I can only tell you that from the people that I've talked to, it's kind of all over the lot. I mean, there are people who were very left brain who became more right brain. There are people who were right brain who became left brain. I mean, there's a woman in the book who used to be a hairdresser who started to get she got quantum physics downloads.
Oh man.
So
okay.
that's, she went from right brain to left brain.
Yeah.
And there's, a scientist in the book, a guy who's a medical doctor at Northwestern University Hospital in Chicago. And so he's a scientist, and he became an artist. So that's, left brain, right brain.
Right.
So I don't know the answer to that question.
Right.
I don't know if there's, one outcome.
Right.
I don't think there is. Yeah.
Probably not. And so maybe where there is something that's happening is something that you mentioned earlier on, which is that there just is more going on. I wonder if, just speculating now, what you think about the idea of these being instances of progressing people in a direction of a soul plan versus, a physical, kind of pattern happening. If the pattern isn't more that they had an intention for a lifetime, and this kind of pushed them down the tracks more in the direction of what their soul plan is.
I do believe that this is something that is part of that's driven by the universe. People cannot give themselves NDEs. I mean, I hear all the time from people, geez, I wish I could have one of those. That would solve problems.
Yeah. Just without the death part, though.
Yeah, it's not like it just creates other issues. It's not going to solve anybody's problems. So,
yeah.
But it seems to be driven by the universe, and it seems to happen at some exquisite moment when the universe says, here's this person who's been kind of in this state for a number of years, and many of them seem to be, their lives seem to be referenced by darkness. They have lots of issues, and they go along for a certain period of time, and then the universe appears to step in, and boom, this event happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then the person has to deal with it. That,
right.
And that can take many years. But, now when I interviewed all the people for my book, I also did readings on them, because there were questions about what happened to them, questions that couldn't be answered by a questionnaire. This is how the scientists have dealt with NDEs. They give people questionnaires, and,
right.
you're supposed to answer them, and that's going to give you all the answers. But, the truth of the matter is that people said, who were these beings of light that I met? Why didn't I have a life review?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go through a tunnel. Does that mean there's something wrong with me? Those are not questions that could be answered on a questionnaire.
Right.
So I said, look, I'm a medium. I'm a psychic and a medium.
Yeah.
I can look and see if there's some other information that we can get here. And they were all excited about that, because they wanted to know the answers too.
Yeah.
So I did readings for all these people. And, there was certain information that came up consistently that um, appeared to address, some of these issues. And one was that, the universe has a very heavy hand in all this, and the universe has some kind of plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the plan seems to be that all these people are being used as missionaries for the light, to be pillars of light for the world.
Right.
Some of them are able to do it. Some of them are not. Some of them are just kind of lost in the shuffle.
Right.
And that seems to be, I think there's so many that are recruited because a lot of them aren't going to make it,
Mm-hmm.
And, but the universe has some kind of plan. And I think that's what this is all about. And we are tools of the universe. So, when you say your soul plan, I guess that's one way of explaining it. That makes it sound as if we have a say in it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I don't know how much of a say we do have in it.
Right.
It seems like a lot of this is taken out of our hands. I think we have a say in it until the NDE happens. I think most people are just kind of stumbling along,
Mm-hmm.
trying to do whatever they think they should be doing until the universe steps in and says, "Okay, enough of that."
Yeah.
And now this is going to happen.
Right.
And so, and then it's left for the person to try to work hand in hand with the universe to figure out what they're supposed to do with this. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It does, and leads me just to another question and something that you had mentioned, which is that often people come back from their NDEs with some kind of mission or some kind of real. Now they're sort of imbued with purpose. I'm just curious, in your research and people that you spoke to, what some of those types of missions might be, if anyone directly told you that they were on a mission now.
Yeah. Well, so everyone that I read for, who all the cases in the book, I said, look, I have questions that I want to ask in the reading, and you guys can ask questions too. And they said, that's great. They all had the same question: what is my mission? And they all used the word mission. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
say, what job should I take, or should I go back to school, or should I move? They all said, what's my mission?
Right.
So they had this sense of purpose, this sense
Yeah.
of mission.
Yeah.
Some of them knew what their missions were, and some of them didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who knew were the ones that in the book, became the musicians and became the artists and, this sort of thing.
Right.
They, somehow this mission kind of manifested. Now, for one person in the book, one of the cases, this person became a musician like the day after their NDE. They went out and bought all this equipment. They'd never played a musical instrument. They went out and bought all this equipment, and they knew this is what they wanted to do.
Right.
And they become a musician. There's another person in the book who's a musician who was kind of led into it. She's a harp thanatologist. She plays harp bedside for
Uh-huh.
people in hospice. Prior to that, she did kind of what you did. She's a producer for documentaries.
Hmm.
So she was, led into the musical thing. The artist, the fellow in Louisville, he was kind of led into it. He was collecting found objects and started using them to make art projects. And the physician in Chicago, who's an artist, he draws these incredible images, on his medical prescription pad, and while he's talking to patients. But he also has had shows, art shows, where he has much larger scale work.
Right.
So he just knew that this was something that seemed right to him. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone has found it in a different way, and there are some who are still looking. There are many people who are still looking. I have many people who come to me for readings, and they say, "What's my mission?" That's
Right.
what they want.
That's
What's
what
my
they
mission?
want to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've you've put a lot of time into this research, and you have your book, Life After Near Death. Are you still also are you still focused on mediumship too, and just general readings for people and that kind of thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am. I'm a psychic and a medium, and I do readings both in person and long distance by Skype. And the long distance readings work exactly the same as the in person readings because
Hmm.
energy is non-local,
Right.
and we sit and talk to each other just like I'm talking to you over Skype.
Right.
So it works great.
Yeah.
Um, I
I'm
also
pretty
teach.
grateful though that we have the Skype so I can see you. So.
And yeah, so I also teach workshops and I give a lot of talks.
Uh-huh.
And I'm working on another book right now
Hmm.
about my experiences as a death doula. Death doulas sit bedside with people who are actively dying at hospice,
Right.
and because I am both a death doula and a medium, I'm able to see things that transpire in the invisible world that others are not able to see.
Right.
And things like families in spirit who come to visit and meet with those who are passing on,
Hmm.
and the experiences that someone at end of life is having that others are not able to see.
Right.
So I will have a book, Diary of a Death Doula, on that subject that'll be coming out later this year.
Right.
Um, and if anyone wants to contact me, of course, I have two websites, Deborah Diamond Psychic and DeborahDiamondAuthor.com.
Right.
So contact me for a reading, and I have several Facebook pages as well.
Yeah.
Um, but I do read for people all over the world. One thing that's happened with my book is that so many people have read it and responded that either they had an NDE and they never talked about it, so now after reading the book they feel not so isolated,
Hmm.
or people who have had a spiritually transformative experience have contacted me and said, something happened to me and I don't know what it is, but now that I read the book, it all makes sense because
Right.
the components of a spiritually transformative experience are very similar to a near-death experience, the after
Right.
effects.
Yeah. I want to go back to the death doula topic just for a second, because wow, what a beautiful addition having a person like yourself would be to that time, in hospice for people. And I say that because my uncle who recently passed, before he passed, he'd had a second really massive stroke, and they knew he was not going to recover from that one. And he was in coma; he wasn't conscious, and I was able to contact him and have a really nice long chat with him while he was, 1 foot still in physical reality and 1 foot in the spirit realm. And he was as fascinated by all of it as I was. He had no idea that something like that was even possible. But it was a real gift for me to be able to talk to him, and I would think your presence there would be as well. I just wondered what moved you to start doing that, and how did you get into that?
Yeah. Well, so in 2001, my mom passed away, and before she passed away, um, we had hospice come to the house, and they were very compassionate and very special. And one thing they did was they handed us a piece of paper, and they said, "Here, you're going to want to read this. This will help you." And I thought, this is probably about medication, or maybe it's even about funeral arrangements. And I looked at it, and it said, if the body's ready and the spirit isn't, you don't leave.
Mm.
And if the spirit's ready and the body isn't, you don't leave.
Uh-huh.
Body's ready and the spirit's ready, you leave.
Huh.
So I thought about that. I thought that was very unusual for, hospice to be handing out something like
Yeah.
it was kind of so spiritual.
Right.
And, you know, I thought about it. And in fact, I thought about it for the next 15 years. And um, it was just something, it was like a record, playing the same record over and over. I just kept thinking about it. And I kept thinking, I want to do something for hospice. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be of service. I knew that I could sit with people who were dying because I'm a medium and I talk to people on the other side all the time. So,
Right.
I felt comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And, so eventually, I trained to be a death doula, and began to sit with people at hospice. So that's how it came about.
Yeah.
And the experience has been very like, in some respects, some of what I've seen in the NDE world.
Mm-hmm.
There is a whole other very rich world taking place, an invisible realm that takes place that,
Right.
those of us in the 3D world just can't access.
Yeah.
And, and for people who are at end of life and having these experiences, like your uncle, they, I don't know what the conversation was like with your uncle, but most of these people will say, I never expected anything like this. This is the most beautiful,
Yep.
rich, incredible, warm experience I've ever had,
Mm-hmm.
in my life. And
Yep.
they're surrounded by family and friends. And,
Yep.
it's just, they want to stay forever.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, people who are experiencing death, what we call clinical death here, don't have any idea that's what's going on. They
Right.
see a lifeless body in a bed hooked up to various, medical equipment,
Yep.
and it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
scary. And, we equate death with, the death of the physical body.
Right.
But in fact, there's, this whole other rich scenario playing out.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, there's this, like everything else, in this realm, there's just a lot more to it.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And my experience was exactly that, what you were saying. He was fascinated by being there. He had no real expectation that anything like that was even possible. He was completely fascinated that he was having a conversation with me. And it was very normal. It was interesting because the medium was we were talking on the telephone. So it was, for me, my experience of it was like, that he was sitting in the room with her and she'd ask him a question and he'd give her a response and then she'd tell me on the phone.
Hmm.
And I remember too, I did ask something of him because he was seeing the light and he was just very, very compelled. He just really, really wanted to go to it. And my mom and my brother were en route to go and visit him at the hospital. And I just said, if there's any way that you could hold off until they got there, that would be great. I know they would love to just, see you. And he said, I'll try. I can't make any promises, but I'll try. And, sure enough, they got there, they walked in the room, they held his hand, and then he went.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
it was just like that. But for me, it was an awesome experience. It was great, and it takes your mind away from exactly what you were talking about, which is when you're seeing the hardware and you're seeing them lying there, and also for people I think that have common DNA, and they're feeling that disconnecting of the resonance between the common DNA. There's great sadness that is setting in, and so for me, I am sad, but I was also just thrilled to be able to have had that conversation and talk to him as he was making that transition, and got to ask him questions too about what it was like, what do you see, what do you feel, and that was actually really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, you had a very special experience then.
Yeah, yeah, it was, and I feel that's something, while it's not personal, you having an opportunity to be in the room with people while that transition is happening, and communicate that to their family, and I would think that feels very special to you as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I think, other people, who've had spiritually transformative experiences, in that I think part of my work is to help others,
Yeah,
and I feel like I do help a lot of other people through my work, and this is another aspect of that.
right.
Um, the Besides telepathically talking with the people who are passing, I also talk with their families,
Mm-hmm.
the families in spirit,
Right,
who always show up. 100% of the time they show up.
right.
It's and I ask them, what are you doing here? And they say, it's part of our job. And I said, how do you know to come in? And they say, it's like we're on speed dial. It's like there's a memory button, and they know, and they can instantaneously appear. And it's very interesting what they do, because they're there, but they stand aside. They let the patient know, we're there for support, but you do what you need to do. Take your time. We're here.
Right.
We love you and we'll be with you, but you do your thing.
Right.
But they're always there. And one of the conversations that I had with the family, they said, well, this is our job, and we are told once you pass and you're on the other side, this is one of the jobs that you're told immediately that you have. When somebody close to you is passing, that you go. And everybody does it. Everybody just knows that's part of your job, and you do it. You never turn it down. So it's really interesting. There's so much more to death, what we call death, than what than what we see. So
right. Yeah. Well, so now, Deborah, you said that that the Diary of a Death Doula is going to be coming out when?
I'm hoping that it will come out later this year, 2018. I'm actually going to put some talk about it a little bit in my newsletter and on Facebook. I've been working on the book as time has allowed over the last few years, and it's about ready to go now. But for anybody who's listening to this podcast and who's interested in this or anything else, you can go on my website and sign up for my newsletter, and that way you'll know about any classes I'm teaching or this new book coming out.
Great. And then Life After Near Death is out right now, and that's available where? Where can people get that?
Okay, so Life After Near Death is available at bookstores like Barnes & Noble. It's also, of course, available online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's also available on my website. So, there are many places, you can buy it many places. And if you like the book and you would like to leave a review, that's always great too, because that motivates the author. Writing.
Yeah, great, awesome. Well, Deborah, I want to thank you for being with us today and sharing your story and what you've been doing. I hadn't heard as specific a research as you've been doing, so that was really fun to hear about. And we've got a lot of NDE folks in the audience that I think are going to have enjoyed that very much too. So we will hopefully talk to you soon then.
I hope so. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And that is Deborah Diamond. And again, if you want to find Deborah, you can go to her website, which is DeborahDiamondPsychic.com, and she also has DeborahDiamondAuthor.com, and you can find her there. And go check her out, check out her books, and you can also sign up for readings as well. And that sounds like a great part of anybody's journey of self-discovery, so I would highly recommend that. And I also just want to remind everyone that we have our Lee Carroll and Cryon Q&A coming up. That's June 6th. That will be live stream, as well as if you are in the area, you can attend in person. I can tell you that's a lot of fun because Lee is just so delightful. So that's something that you would enjoy and get to hear a lot of questions answered about just what is happening, right now on planet Earth, and what kinds of things are going on with, just the energetic changes and how people are responding to that. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and would love to, either see you in person or have you join us on the live stream or get the VOD for that. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for joining us on another Superpowers, and remember to go out and experience the extraordinary.